Sit down. I already poured your drink. You got something on your hands. No, not paint, though you do smell like primer. It's the way you keep rubbing your palms on your jeans, like you touched something you're still trying to wipe off. You've been down south, haven't you? I can smell the humidity, the old wood. Tell me about the house.
I write about strange places, the things people leave behind. Abandoned buildings, forgotten rooms, the histories that get buried under renovation and neglect. Usually I go looking for the story. I travel somewhere, I dig around, I find the thing nobody else noticed. This one came to me. I didn't have to look for it at all. A painter told it to me, a guy named Ray. We were at a bar in Savannah, not this one, and he'd had 3 bourbons and his hands were shaking. He kept rubbing them on his jeans, the way I'm doing now. I didn't notice until I started writing it up. Now I can't stop. Ray paints houses for a living, not art, houses. Interiors, exteriors, trim work, ceilings. 14 years in the trade. He told me there's a rhythm to it. Tape, prime, coat, done. Move on. Good work for someone who doesn't want to think. The brush goes back and forth, the wall changes color, and by the end of the day something is different, better, covered. He said that word a lot. Covered. Like it meant something more than just paint on a wall. I asked him what happened. He said he took a job, a normal job, a house that needed new paint. He said it like that, a house that needed new paint. And then he stopped talking for about 30 seconds, just staring at his glass. The job on Barrow Street changed everything. It came through his usual contractor, a guy named Phil, who feeds him work when the big crews are busy. A Victorian in Savannah, Georgia. The owner had bought it at auction, sight unseen, for renovation. The house had been empty for 7 years. Before that, it had changed hands 11 times since 1990. 11 owners in 35 years, that's a lot of turnover for a house. Before 1990, the records were unclear. Phil said it had been in one family since the 1880s, but nobody could confirm that. Full interior repaint, Phil told him over the phone. Every room, the owner wants it white, pure white. Benjamin Moore Chantilly lace. Every wall, every ceiling, every closet. Ray asked what was on the walls now. Layers, Phil said. Every previous owner painted over the last one. It's thick. You might need to scrape in places. 11 owners in 35 years. I asked Ray later if that bothered him going in. He said no. Houses turn over all the time. People move. People renovate. People get divorced and sell. 11 owners doesn't mean anything, except it did. Every one of those 11 owners had done the same thing, painted over the previous owner's color and moved on. None of them had stripped the walls. None of them had gone down to the plaster. He gave Phil a quote. Phil accepted. Ray drove down on a Monday. The house was beautiful in the way old Savannah houses are. Tall windows, heart pine floors, plaster walls with the slight waviness that means they were done by hand. 3 stories, 12 rooms. High ceilings with crown molding that someone had painted over so many times it had lost its detail. Each layer softening the edges until the roses carved into the plaster looked like lumps. Ray said walking through it felt like walking through something that was holding its breath. Not threatening, just waiting, the way a room waits when it knows someone is coming. He started in the front parlor, ground floor, best light. Set up his gear, taped the trim, rolled a test strip of primer. It didn't take. The primer beaded on the surface like water on wax. The existing paint was so thick, so layered, that the wall had a sheen. Not glossy, but sealed, impervious, like skin he'd have to scrape. He got his 5-in-1 tool and started at the corner. The first layer came off in thick curls, a dark green, maybe 10 years old. Under that, burgundy. Under that, pale yellow. Under that, blue. Each layer distinct, each a different era. Each someone's idea of what that room should look like. Green, burgundy, yellow, blue, cream, gray, darker gray, a salmon pink that screamed 1970s, mint green, olive, a brown so dark it was almost black. He counted 11 layers, matching the 11 owners since 1990. Under the 11th layer, he expected plaster, the bare wall, the original surface he'd prime and paint white and make new. What he found was writing. Pencil on plaster. Small, cramped handwriting, covering the entire wall from baseboard to crown molding. The same sentence, repeated hundreds of times, written in rows like lines in a notebook. Do not let it see the walls bare. Do not let it see the walls bare. Do not let it see the walls bare. Ray stared at it, ran his hand over it. The pencil marks were old, dull, smudged in places, but deep. Someone had pressed hard. Someone had written this with urgency. Not once, not as a joke, not as a message for a future owner. Hundreds of times, thousands maybe. With the kind of repetition that means either madness or absolute sincerity. He went to the next wall, scraped down through the layers. Same thing, same sentence, same handwriting, covering every inch. He went to the hallway, scraped a section, same. The dining room, the kitchen, the back stairwell, every wall in the house, under every layer of paint, carried the same warning. Do not let it see the walls bare.
100 years of paint. And beneath it all, instructions. Someone wanted very badly to be understood.
Ray called Phil, told him about the writing. Phil paused, then said it was probably the old owner, the one who had it since the 1880s. Old houses have weird stuff. He told Ray to ignore it and prime over it. It's on every wall, Phil, every single wall. So prime over every wall. That's what you're being paid to do. He hung up. Ray looked at the wall. The sentence stared back at him in its cramped, urgent hand. He primed over it, watched the white roller erase the words, line by line, until the wall was blank and clean and ready for paint. There's something satisfying about that, he said. The way white covers everything. The way a wall goes from cluttered to clean in one stroke. It's why he does this work, the erasure, the making new. He did the parlor that day, scrapped, primed, first coat. The white was perfect, clean and bright and new. He stepped back and felt the satisfaction he always feels when an old wall becomes new, covered, better. That night he slept in the house. The owner had set up a camp bed in one of the upstairs rooms, easier than commuting from a motel every day. He lay in the dark and listened to the house settle. Old houses talk at night. Creaks, pops, the slow exhalation of wood adjusting to temperature, normal sounds. The kind of sounds that make you feel like the house is alive, but in a comfortable way, like it's breathing in its sleep. At 2 a.m. he woke up, not from a noise, from a feeling. The feeling of being looked at. He lay still, the room was dark. The camp bed was in the center, away from the walls. He'd scraped the walls in this room, but hadn't primed them yet. The writing was exposed. He could see it in the faint light from the street, rows and rows of penciled words, covering every surface. And he had the overwhelming sense that the room was larger than it should be. Not wider, not taller, deeper, as if the walls had moved back a few inches, creating a space between the wall and the darkness behind it, a gap that hadn't been there when he went to sleep. He turned on his phone flashlight. The walls were where walls should be. The writing was there. Nothing had moved, but the shadows in the corners behaved incorrectly. They didn't fall where the light said they should. They pooled in places that should have been illuminated, as if something between the light and the wall was casting a shadow that had no source. He got up, walked to the wall, put his hand on the plaster. It was cold, not night cold. The deep cold of a surface that hasn't been touched by warmth in a very long time. The cold of something that exists on the other side of temperature, and under his palm, movement. Not vibration, not the house settling. A slow lateral sliding, as if something on the other side of the plaster was moving along the wall, pacing, measuring the space, running its fingers along the inside of its enclosure and finding, for the first time in years, a bare spot where the layers had been removed. He pulled his hand back. He said the sensation stayed in his palm for hours afterward. A memory of movement, something slow and deliberate, pressing against the barrier, testing it. Ray told me he stood in the center of that room for a full minute, flashlight in one hand, the other hand curled against his chest, and he could feel the attention of the room focused on the walls where the writing was exposed. Not on him, on the bare plaster, the gaps in the armor. He primed that room at 3 a.m. Every wall. Didn't wait for morning. rolled primer on plaster in the dark by flashlight, covering the words, sealing the surface, putting a layer between whatever was on the other side and the bare, exposed wall. When the last strip of writing disappeared under white primer, the feeling stopped, like a switch. The room was just a room. The walls were just walls. The cold was gone. The shadows fell where shadows should. He finished standing in the hallway, watching the wet primer dry, breathing hard, telling himself he'd had a dream. It took him 8 days to do the whole house. He developed a system: scrape a room, read the words, he couldn't help it, then prime immediately. Never leave a wall bare overnight. The moment the plaster was exposed, get the primer on it, seal it, cover it. The system worked. During the day, the house was just a house, plaster and wood and light through tall windows. He'd scrape and prime and the work was normal. The writing was unsettling but manageable. Words on a wall. An old person's obsession, easy to explain away in daylight. He broke the rule on day 6. Third floor bathroom, a small room, no windows, just a clawfoot tub and a pedestal sink. He scraped the walls in the afternoon and planned to prime in the morning. The room was small. It could wait. At 2 a.m., the sound woke him. Not a knock, not a creak. A sound like wet skin sliding on glass. Slow, rhythmic, coming from directly above him, from the 3rd floor, from the bathroom. He didn't go up. He lay in his camp bed and listened to the sliding sound, and he thought about the words on the walls, and he thought about whoever had written them, someone who lived in that house for over, say, 100 years and painted every wall and wrote the same warning on every surface and understood something that Ray was only now beginning to understand. The paint was not decoration, it was containment. Every coat, every color, every year. Not a choice, a necessity. A ritual performed by people who understood what lived in their walls and knew the only option was to keep it sealed.
11 owners, 11 layers, and every single one of them kept painting.
At dawn, he went upstairs. The bathroom walls were bare plaster, covered in the cramped handwriting. Everything was as he'd left it, except the mirror above the sink. It was fogged. Not from moisture. There was no moisture in that room. No running water, no steam. Nothing that could produce condensation. The fog was on the inside of the glass, as if something warm had been breathing on the other side of the mirror. Something that had been standing there, in whatever space exists behind reflections, pressing its face to the glass and exhaling. And in the fog, written by a finger or something like a finger, from the mirror side, "Thank you." Ray primed that room in 11 minutes. He told me he's never worked faster in his life. He said his hands were shaking so hard the primer went on uneven, and he didn't care. He just needed it covered, sealed. One more layer between here and there. He finished the job on day 8. Every wall in the house, scraped, primed, 2 coats of Chantilly lace, pure white, clean, sealed. He packed his gear, did his walkthrough. The house was beautiful, bright, and new, and empty. White walls, high ceilings, pine floors. A house that looked like it had no history, no layers, nothing underneath. As he was loading his van, the next-door neighbor came out. An old woman, 80s at least, with a cane and a cardigan despite the Savannah heat. "You're the painter," she said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "You painted over everything?" "Yes, ma'am. Whole house, Chantilly lace." She looked at the house, her eyes moved across the facade the way you'd look at a fence you're not sure will hold. The family who built that house, the original family, they painted the walls every year. Every single year. New color, new coat. They said it was because they liked change. She paused. They painted every year because every year a new layer was needed. The old one wore thin from the inside. She turned and went back into her house. Didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Ray stood by his van for a long time after that. He looked at the house, fresh and white and clean, the way a new owner wants it. 2 coats of Chantilly lace between the inside of those rooms and whatever had been writing on that mirror. 2 thin coats after a century of careful, deliberate layering. That was 3 weeks before Ray told me the story. The owner had moved in the previous Tuesday. Ray got a call from Phil. "The Barrow Street owner is asking if you used a primer with high hide. He says the paint in the front parlor is changing." "Changing how?" "He says the white is getting thinner. He can see something underneath. Lines, he thinks." like writing. Ray didn't say anything for a long time. Then he told Phil to tell the guy to paint over it. Right now. Today. Don't wait. And to keep painting. Every year. Don't let it get thin. Phil laughed. It's a paint job, not a life sentence. Ray hung up. He sat across from me in that bar in Savannah, rubbing his palms on his jeans, and he said, I think about the layers. 11 owners, 11 colors, and before that, a family who painted every year for 100 years. Each coat a seal. Each color a wall between the inside of the house and whatever lives in the space between the plaster and the dark. He looked at his hands. They were clean, professionally clean the way a painter's hands get after years of turpentine and scrubbing. But he kept rubbing them. The words were a warning. The paint was a prison. And I stripped it all down to nothing and put on 2 coats of Chantilly lace and called it done. He finished his drink. 2 coats. After 100 years of annual layers. A long pause. I don't think 2 coats will hold.
Containment, that's what interests me about this one. Not the thing behind the walls. There's always something behind the walls. What interests me is the response. 100 years of painting. Not to destroy it, not to fight it, just to keep one more layer between here and there, year after year. Generation after generation. The quiet discipline of maintenance as survival. What would you do if the only thing between you and something very patient was a coat of paint, and it was wearing thin from the inside? I'll be here. I always am.